Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
And you want a quality education where you meet people who will be part of your professional network for the rest of your life. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent. It is Thursday, December 19th, and welcome to episode number 99, What You Need to Know About FAFSA. In this week's news, as students struggle with stress and depression, colleges act as counselors. And we're in chapter 99 of 171 answers, and we're talking through what you need to know about the very important FAFSA. And this week's question is from a mom who wants to know if it is a bad strategy to apply to one school in the early decision round and wait for that decision before applying to other schools. And Mark concludes his interview with Miss Emily Griffin in the final part of how you can evaluate and fully utilize a college's career center.
Okay, friends, it's announcement time. And we told you, I don't know, was that about a month ago, Anika, where we said we let everybody know that we've been approved for Pandora and we'd let everybody know when we're live on Pandora?
Oh, maybe.
Around there, something like that.
Yeah.
We're live on Pandora for you Pandora people. And I'm about a month late. I think we've been up about a month. I just noticed in the stats, hey, what's all that Pandora doing? So you guys probably knew this before we did, but it's okay.
Announcement to us. Thanks.
Yes, announcement to ourselves. Speaking of announcements, you are going to want to tune into next week because we've got a big announcement for you. But that's a tease, so we're going to hold you in suspense for a week. So tune in to next week, even though it's going to be close to Christmas. You'll still get a nice big announcement. And, we're working on our photo gallery over here from our listeners. This is a request from Anika. So for all of you listeners out there, just snap a photo with an iPhone or an Android or use your LinkedIn photo, whatever is easier for you. We want to put a whole photo gallery of all of our listeners up on our website. And you would just snap a picture and send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. They've been coming in, but slower than I thought they would. So would love to have our regular listeners snap a shot, whatever you want. It could be you and your child, college counselors, you and your students, do a professional thing, you and your family, whatever you want. We want to try to kind of make our website a little more, what would you say, Nika? Lively, family? What would we say?
All of that.
And the above. And the above. Also, we do want to say anyone who gives a gift of any amount to help us reduce and defray our expenses and stay commercial free, you become one of our podcast partners. And as a partner, you're going to get an additional 3 to 4 hours of bonus content. Now, that's not at once, okay? Mm-hmm. That's like an extra 12 to 15 minutes a month, but that adds up to 3 to 4 hours. And then you will also get a special 75-minute webinar we're doing on Sunday, January 12th at 7:30 Eastern Time on admission trends in 2019. So if you are interested, Anika, what's our website?
www.yourcollegeboundkid.com.
And you would just go to the donate button. Also, friends, keep sending in those great articles. You've been sending us some fantastic articles. And at a minimum, it helps me in my professional development to read it, especially if I missed the article. And also, there's a good chance that we will feature the article in many, many times. Nika, how many times have I said, Nika, here's another article. We got to change our list around. And some listeners sent in. Yes, send in some great articles. So we get a lot of our great articles from you all. Also, I'm going to say for the college spotlights, if you're wondering why there are not going to be any Massachusetts schools for a while, just today, Nick, I opened up my email and it said, we are inviting you, all expenses paid, transportation, airfare, meals, everything, to fly to Boston to tour 5 schools: Emerson, Brandeis, Holy Cross, Worcester Polytech, and Simmons. So I said, yes, I'm in. So what I'm going to do, that's going to be in April. And what I'll do is I'll feature those 5 schools in back-to-back weeks because I would have been fresh from being there. So I'm going to do 5 straight weeks of Massachusetts schools, but I'm going to hold off on the Massachusetts schools until April because I'm going to be there. Well, that's it. That's it for our announcements. Now for our admissions tip. So, Nick, how we've talked about fast apps, snap apps, VIP apps, priority apps? Do you remember I have conversations about them? What do you recall us saying about them in the past?
Well, they just make it easier for the user to get it in quick. And I feel like there was some incentives around them. I can't remember.
Yeah. So these pre-filled apps. They almost fill everything out for you, a good portion of it. We say, first thing they do is they say, you know what? You are one of our most special, most prized applicants. And because of your extraordinary accomplishment, we're waiving the application fees. And
That's right.
you're eligible for scholarship money normally. And all you have to do is, name here, this, there, and the other. And so it appeals to people, right? Because it appeals to the ego because you're being acknowledged because you're great. Appeals to your pocketbook because there's usually money. And it appeals to the convenience factor because there's making it quick and easy for you. And my tip is when you get one of those, like Tulane, who seems to send one to every single student I work with. Sorry, Tulane, but you do. Don't trust the numbers from those schools. The reason for that is because they are counting them as applications. And so it skews all of their numbers. One of the things in the business, Anika, is that there's no common definition of what an actual application is. So is an application all you did was sign your name and we filled everything out for you and we can count you in the numbers? Or is it one where you have like 4 additional essays? They all count as applications. And one reason schools do them is to bolster their admission numbers so they can have a lower acceptance rate. So just when you see schools that are sending you those, I'm not saying not to do them if you like the school. I'm just saying you can expect that their numbers, the number of applications and acceptances and all that are inflated. And then admissions vernacular, the term of the day is DSO. DSO. Now, DSO, this is one of these terms. I've never actually heard an admission officer use this like at an information session or talking to students in a group. It's kind of one of these terms that's used when admission officers talk amongst themselves at a committee oftentimes. And what it stands for is DSO didn't stand out. Didn't stand out. So, last week how we talked about the well-rounded versus the pointy student, Anika? This is usually at a highly selective school. It's that well-rounded kid that's a great applicant, absolutely nothing wrong with them, but they just DSO. They just didn't stand out. So that's DSO. I know, we have some cruel terms, don't we?
Yes, you do.
That's not one to advertise. You were DSO. You did not stand out, even though you were probably exceptional. Probably a total rock star. And for our college spotlight, we're going all the way to Rhode Island for the first time, and we are putting Providence College under the spotlight. And remember, our college spotlights are at the very, very end. So if you tune us out at the end, you'll miss our college spotlight. But I'm excited to talk to you guys about Providence College. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right, this week's article is entitled, As Students Struggle with Stress and Depression, Colleges Act as Counselors. And this one is found in the good old New York Times, written by Mr. Brad Wolverton. I think I said that right. And so one of his sub-little headlines is that nationwide, students typically have to wait almost 7 business days for their first appointment with a college counselor, according to a 2017 report. And at some colleges, it can be more than 2 months. So this article shares several examples of how colleges are investing in their counseling staff. And at the same time, this is forcing many other schools to rethink their treatment strategies. And of course, this is all around, mental health issues. And because this article goes on, Mark, about the dozens of schools who are increasing their efforts, you can only remember that there are only a few thousand universities that exist. So yikes, there's clearly a lot of work to be done by a lot more schools. So Mark, I know that we can't talk about mental health enough. So what did you think of this article?
I'll tell you what I thought. Thank you there, Anika. So our regular listeners know about half a year ago, I said my greatest concern for this generation of students is not how much student debt they will graduate with. It isn't whether or not they'll get a job after they graduate. It isn't whether or not they'll pick a career that they love, even that I have all those concerns. And those concerns are real. But my biggest concern is, are they mentally healthy? Because there's an epidemic going on in the culture. And we did 10 straight weeks. We did a recommended resource, a website, a book, or something to address this concern because it's so real. And, social media is part of it. There are a lot of things that are causing this. And so I feel so strongly about this topic. And I think this article was just really well written, even that it was kind of macabre and dour. I felt like I felt a little beaten up after reading it, Anika. Did you have that? Did it have that effect on you?
Well, the fact that it started out with that image of those book bags, that traveling exhibition.
Oh, yeah. Tell our listeners that. Tell our listeners that image.
Yeah. So it's a photograph of, I think it's Ithaca College is where it was taken.
It is.
And it was basically, I guess, a memorial of all the students that have committed suicide. So it's this series of book bags that are just laying around in this kind of juxtaposed position. And it's really alarming to know that. And I'm assuming, Mark, that those were the actual book bags of the people that were deceased. I'm not sure about that. But it was pretty sad to just see that image was pretty frightening.
Yeah, actually, that is a good thought. I don't know. It's part of a traveling exhibition that's going around to college campuses to raise heightened attention of, mental health on college campuses and how pressing and urgent this problem is. And so, yeah, it was one of those cases where it's true, Anika, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So just seeing that picture just grabbed me.
Yeah.
So, Anika, in order to underscore the fact that I think this is such a pressing problem, and because I think this article is so well written, I'm going to break my rule. Do you know what that means?
Are you going to read?
How did you know?
That's the only rule we have for you right now.
There you go. I'm going to come out of the penalty box and read this article because I know the people driving, walking the dog, shopping, doing the dishes, they're not going to read the article. They'll hear it, they'll listen to the podcast. They'll never, I don't know, probably 1% of people, I don't know what percent, but I'm sure a very small percent of listeners go back and actually just do it, right? All right, here it goes. I'm literally fighting for my life, but staying safe, 22-year-old Christopher Byhan emailed a professor in late September. I won't be in class today, or perhaps for a bit, and just pray that I won't be hospitalized long term. As Mr. Byhan prepared to check into a psychiatric ward 4 hours from campus, a crisis team from the private liberal arts college in central New York swung into action. Shortly after Mr. Byhan wrote to his professor, a campus security officer went to his apartment to make sure he was okay. A social worker from the college reached out to discuss academic options as he worked to manage his bipolar disorder. 2 weeks later, after returning to his home in Medford, New Jersey, for treatment, he applied for a medical leave of absence from the college, his 6th leave in 4 years. In extensive interviews, Mr. Byhan recounted his experiences. He has also written about them in a blog and in Ithaca College's student paper. He started a grassroots social media campaign to promote acceptance of mood disorders, inspired to share his story in hopes of helping other people. His journey illustrates the intense struggle students can face and the increasing steps colleges are taking to manage what some experts are calling a mental health crisis on campus. Ithaca officials said they could not discuss a student's health records, citing federal privacy laws. Students and institutions are grappling with issues like the surge in school shootings, trauma from suicides, and sexual assault. But it's not just the crises that have shaken this generation. It's the grinding, it's the everyday stresses from social media pressures to relationship problems to increased academic expectations. More than 60% of college students say they had experienced overwhelming anxiety in the past year, according to a 2018 report from the American College Health Association. And over 40% said they felt so depressed that they had difficulty functioning. Money problems are exacerbating their worries. Mental health professionals say college students have experienced financial burdens on a different scale than many of their predecessors. They grew up during the Great Recession and they've seen family members lose jobs and homes. They have great uncertainty about their career prospects and feel pressure to excel academically or to risk losing job opportunities. There's a much more radical feeling that you're either a winner or a loser, said Victor Swartz, a psychiatrist and medical director of the JED Foundation, which helps colleges improve their mental health programming. That's put tremendous pressure on college students and is feeding a lot of anxiety we're seeing. The students have encountered more mental health problems. They have sought help in record numbers. Between the fall of 2009 and the spring of 2015, the number of students who visited campus counselors centers increased by more than 30%, while college enrollment climbed by just 5%, according to a 2015 report by the Center of Collegiate Mental Health.
Well, you read that entire thing. So, I mean...
and subtly you said, and don't ever do it again?
You are on probation, but I'll give you a pass on this one because mental health is a real deal, right?
Thank you.
I do want to say that I've actually ordered and started reading your recommendation, The Stress Years of Their Lives.
Oh.
Was it Dr. Hiz? I forget the other doctor that this is written by, but I'm about 4 chapters in, and I can tell you already it's a very practical resource, which I wasn't expecting. From how to discern if your kid is going through something, what records you should make sure you should have access to before they even start college, and even some exercises in discussion with your students. So I'm actually kind of feeling bad that I didn't read this before Jalen went off to college, but it is a serious, serious matter that we got to pay more attention to, clearly.
Yeah, and another really good book, I recommended this one before too, especially for girls. It's called Under Pressure, Confronting the Epidemic of Stress and Anxiety in Girls. And just all 10 of those resources I recommended. I'm going to have one more today in our recommended resource section that I did include that's excellent. So what should our takeaways be, Anika?
Well, I think my takeaway is, or I think everyone's takeaway should be that it's, again, remember how few campuses are doing that stuff. Like it's extravagant in some cases, but there are not a lot of schools that are doing all of that. So I started thinking about, our own health plans, our personal health plans and how their mental health services, I know there's a lot of activity, again, in politics trying to get, increased mental health coverage in our own personal policies. So if we have our kids on those policies, how much we really need to start paying attention to that and how much we need to prep them for what they can have access to beyond their campuses. Like, don't wait in line for 3 weeks. You can actually go to a provider in the area. So that was something to think about, or at least I thought of.
I think that's a good one. So you're basically saying make sure your own healthcare plan, if it's optional to include mental health services, make sure you're not declining it. And if it's there, make sure your child knows about it to take advantage of it, right?
That's right. Yep.
And for me, my takeaways were a couple. One was, one of the things I think we need to do for our listeners is to help our listeners know how to evaluate a mental health center and the counseling services that a college has as part of the evaluation process. Mm-hmm. In the same way right now where we have Emily Griffin on telling all of us how to evaluate a career center in the admission process. So you can know, that's something that I feel we need to provide for our listeners. So I'm going to, and I already know some people, but I'm going to find someone who would be outstanding and have them come on the podcast so that they can train all of us, myself included, on several things. And so these are some of the things that I will want to cover in that interview. One, how to know the trouble and danger signs for your own child that they're struggling. That would be a great question to ask a professional. Secondly, what are services that a student should expect? I mean, what are the services that differentiate an excellent mental health facility and department versus a mediocre or subpar one? Those are some of my takeaways, Anika. And I think we just can't, I think we need to stay in touch with our kids and listen to our kids, listen to what they say between the lines, as well as not between the lines. And then, a lot of times people just want to be understood. And so the suck it up and get it together message is not really the most effective message if somebody's struggling.
Okay, Mark, before you move on, you won't believe my headphones just fell off my head.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't even hear any noise.
Because I called him. I was like, what is happening right now?
What are you doing over there?
Falling apart.
What are you doing over
Good
there?
God. Okay.
What is in the North Carolina water?
I don't know. It's cold outside. That's what
Don't blame it on the weather.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, friends, we are in chapter 99, and the name of this chapter in the book is called "What Do I Need to Know About the Very Important FAFSA?" And for you first-time listeners, someone may think, "What are you talking about the book? I thought this was a podcast." So I wrote a book called 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions. I take the most frequently asked questions that I get as a college coach, and I just made a chapter for every single question. And so in this part of our podcast, we go chapter by chapter through the book and hit on some of the highlights. Anika, you've read the chapter. How do you want to approach this? Because we got about 20 points here. We don't want to hit them all. Do you want to hit on some of the ones that you like, and I'll hit on some I like, or how do you want to do this?
Well, I got mine. I've got a good 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 5 that are...
Okay, say the 5 that jumped out to you, and then I'll add a few.
Okay, so the first one is always the best one for me, and that is that a lot of schools require you to fill out FAFSA even for their merit aid. So I think that's, I always think that's critical.
Let's expand on that because that's important. So a lot of times people think, well, I'm not interested in financial aid. I don't need financial aid. So I'm going to tune this part out. But there are colleges that require you, even if you don't want or don't qualify for need-based aid, but you want to get scholarship money to do the FAFSA.
Yep. All right. So that is number 1 for me. Number 2 was one that we took from you recently when Janaea was starting the process, and that students should always use a permanent email address and not their high school address. So Janaea, and I got on her early on. I was like, listen, get rid of that Janaea Madden at George School stuff. You know, I had her create her, her own separate Gmail just for her college search, period. So that was a great one. The third one is that you have to do it annually. You know, people get through it the first time, like, oh, I'm done. Like, nope, got to do it every year. So that was my third one. The fourth important one to me was that the earlier, the better, because some of these funds are on a first come, first serve basis. I probably should have put that number 2 or 3, but that is really key. And then my final one is one I didn't actually know. And I didn't know FAFSA had a paper form.
I'm almost glad that you didn't know that. Because I tell everybody to do the online one, not the paper one. There's so many advantages to the online one. So
where in the world do you get the paper form from, though? Who has that?
You get it off FAFSA.gov. You can do a download.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, I know there's some areas where, the technology isn't always there, but still, it's just like, whoo, don't do the paper, y'all. I don't care what you got to get.
Well, no, there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to do the paper. One of them is, you can't do what's called the IRS data retrieval with the paper version, which syncs your tax returns to the FAFSA, and it decreases the chances that you're going to be FAFSA verified. And it also pre-populates a lot of the FAFSA and makes it easier to do. Also, you'll get your SAR, your student aid report, much, much, much faster if you do the online versus the paper. So it speeds up the time. And also you can add more schools on the online one than you can on the paper. So there's lots and lots of reasons why you don't want to do not let alone the fact that you could get lost in mail and all that stuff.
All right. Okay. Well, that's my top list.
Okay. So I'll just add a couple because that you didn't add, and just a couple of points about the FAFSA. So the FAFSA, which is an acronym for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, administered by the Department of Education, it is filled out by approximately 20 million people every year. And what it does is it generates over $120 billion with a B dollars in federal grants, loans, and work study. But there are many states where less than half of the population completes it. So we said once before, crazy, insane amount of money is being left on the table by people just not completing this. So that's one thing. We talked before about you want to create a FAFSA ID or an FSA ID, and you'll need to do that. That will serve as your electronic signature, and that's a change. For people that are a little older, you may be like, what is this? Well, that's because up until 2015, they used to have what was called a PIN, a Federal Student Aid PIN. And in May of 2015, they switched to a FAFSA ID, and that's your signature. And for a dependent student, a parent's going to need to do it, and a student's going to need to do it. Now, when you do the FAFSA every year, as Anika said, it does get a little bit easier in subsequent years because it is pre-populated. A lot of your information is pre-populated. But there are over 100 questions on here, so that's also important. Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length, Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com.
Oh, Mark, can I say one thing about that FSA ID?
Yeah, go ahead.
So one thing that I remember. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I just said you're Anika. You can always speak up.
Oh, Mark, I don't know what's going on with me tonight. Okay, so one thing I remember about the FSA ID is that, especially if you're working up against a deadline, it actually takes a few days, some cases, for the FSA ID to return. So don't wait until the day before your deadline is and try to get your little ID together, because you have to sign off on it. So that's just one thing I wanted to point out.
Yeah, another thing, and the FSA ID, you can do that before October 1st. So you can't start doing the FAFSA until October 1st, but you can get the FSA ID. It's open, certainly open. It's open. I don't know when it's open, but it's definitely open in September, because I remember working with some students in September this year. And so you can get the FSA ID much before you can get the FAFSA. Another thing is every state has their own FAFSA deadline. And this is kind of important because before 2016, the FAFSA looked at the previous year's tax information. Now it's looking at prior year, 2 years before. And so now that it's doing 2 years before, quite a few states moved up their deadlines, because if you miss the state deadline, then you're not going to get any money. And there are quite a few states that is first come, first serve. And when they run out of money, they run out of money for state aid. And so according to the Department of Education, Alaska, Illinois, Kentucky, Nevada, North Carolina, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Vermont, and Washington have moved their deadline and to now read as soon as possible after October 1st. So it happens. It happened in Illinois, where they ran out of money. The people that waited too long, the money was gone. So that's something to keep in mind. One other thing is, once you complete the FAFSA, you get a SAR, which is a student aid report. And you want to read that over very, very carefully, because there can be mistakes on there. Okay? I've heard experts say as many as 3 in 10 people make mistakes on their FAFSA. And one mistake could cost you crazy money if you put a zero in the wrong place.
So what do you do when you make those mistakes, Mark, and you realize it later? Is it just too late? You're dead in the water?
No. That's a great question. So all you do is you log back in with your portal and you make changes. That's one thing that's great. You don't have to do FAFSA in one sitting either. You can stop and start. It saves everything. You get what's called a save key. You go log back in. And if you find you make an error, you go back in and you change it.
Wait, but you can do that even after you get your report, SAR?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll generate a new one.
Okay.
And now it's different for the profile. Okay. That's different. For the profile, it's the other financial aid form. Once you've done it, you have to send something directly to the school. You can't go in and change the profile. But for the FAFSA, you can go in, edit it. It'll generate a new SAR. And I see that. And one of the common mistakes I see is that people list their home as an asset when you're not supposed to list your home in an asset. Or they list the amount in their retirement account as an asset. And both of those things will jack you up, because they'll have you paying a lot more money than you're supposed to pay. Those are just a couple common mistakes I see.
Okay.
So those are just some things. And we just wanted to know this is extremely important, mostly for need-based federal aid, to be honest, but there are some schools that require the FAFSA. And one of the reasons why, and I had a financial aid director tell me this, in fact, when we had on our podcast before, Michael Runowitz from WashU in St. Louis, this was off the air. It wasn't in our recording, but he said, Mark, you know why a lot of schools require the FAFSA? And I didn't know this. He told me this. He said that the amount of FAFSA submissions that we have is correlated between how much work-study money our colleges get. So if we require the FAFSA, the formula they use means we're going to have more work-study money that we can give to kids. So interesting, isn't it?
It is.
Might have to go on version 2 of my book. All right, I'm FAFSA'd out, Anika. it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right. This week's question comes from a mom named Gail, and I'm going to read her question here, I think verbatim. She says, my son has applied to one school early decision. It is a school we have visited twice, researched well, and can afford. My question is applying to one school and only one, at least until he finds out in December if he got into the school or not, is that a bad strategy? If he gets in, will there be any possible reason later to regret not having applied to more schools? Just wondering if it's okay to apply to the only one school.
Okay, before I answer this, I'm putting you on the hot seat, Miss Anika Madden. How would you answer this question to Gail?
I don't think.
And I'll tell you how I would answer it.
You don't want to hear my answer because I'm all about the short list. The shorter the list, the better.
So what would you tell her?
I don't know, because if you're doing it through early decision, you clearly are making a commitment. That is a binding commitment. So right. You are going through. Now, I will say, okay, if you were to decide to apply to that one school, are you already prepared to apply to the other ones? Like, have you done the prep work around the applications around the other schools that you're like, do you even have other schools lined up? Like, how much are you prepared to move on if you only apply to that one school? I just put that out there as something to consider if you were to do that. I don't think it's a terrible thing. I honestly don't. But I would like to know how much she would be prepared once they get that decision back in case he does not get in. Like, are you like having to start from scratch and just running around and, like a crazy person?
So you know what I'm thinking over here? Take one guess what I'm thinking.
Shoot, no. You saying you have your balanced list of you?
What I'm thinking is, no, this time you don't.
Oh.
I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, is Miss Anika Madden trying to come take my job away at Kip?
Oh.
He trying to come from my job and trying to take my job away from my clients? That was that.
Are you somewhat agreeing with that?
I'm very much agreeing with that.
Wow.
So let me explain why. So I said in Gail's case, it makes perfect sense, although for most people it wouldn't. Why? Why does it make sense in Gail's case? Listen to what she said. Mm-hmm. Key things in early decision. One, it's a school that we have visited twice. So hopefully that means thoroughly visit, talk to all the people you need to. I say kick the car, kick the tires around, did the MRI. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming it was a thorough visit. So that's great. Secondly, in addition to that, she says we researched it well. Thirdly, we can afford it. So with early decisions, a binding commitment, so money's not an issue. You've researched it well, you like it. That's the perfect early decision applicant. Now, I do have some additional questions that I would ask Gail, and many of them, you included.
Okay.
So that's when you started listening to my questions. I'm going to say, you coming for my job?
Absolutely not.
Because I'm not coming for your job. I'm not going to North Carolina A&T and trying to do all kind of organization. I'll be fired so fast. Not happening. I like higher ed, but I'll stick in admissions and counseling. All right. So here are my questions that I have for Gail. How many other schools have you visited? In other words, is this love at first sight? Is this like falling for the first girl that asked you out on a date? Because ED is like saying, I want to marry you. Right. Like regular admission, rolling admission, early action, they're like, I want to date around a little bit. Like, I like you, but I might like somebody more. So did you just fall for the first school? I'd like to know that you visited multiple other schools. So I'm giving a qualified yes to Gail. Like it's okay for her to do this, but these are the qualifying. I'd want her to check all these boxes, right? That you visited other schools. You didn't just visit one, fall for one, and didn't visit any others. Because the school you may think you like, I've had many people just fall all head over heels for their first school. And then when they visit many others, that other school went down the list a little, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is what you brought up. Do you have a group of other schools that you are ready to apply to if you are deferred or denied? Okay, so this should be a group of other schools that are a balanced list that you've thoroughly researched as well. Okay, so that's important. Have you looked at their applications? Now, I do recommend this. I have about 15, maybe 20 students right now applying early decision that I'm working with. 12 to 15 to highly, highly selectives, and then another group to moderately selective. Most early decision schools are pretty selective because ED is offered by less than 10% of colleges, so it tends to be the more selective ones. So one thing that I do with the other students, Anika, is I do make sure they have the applications completed, but they don't have to submit them. Not all of them. but I'd like to see at least 3 and preferably 4 or 5 completed.
Mhm.
Now, why do you think I would say that?
For that same reason, backup plan.
It's not just the backup plan, it's the time crunch. So let's say
Oh, yeah.
so most early decisions, although there's differences, most of them will notify you around December 15th if you're in.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're not in, a lot of the other schools that you may apply to are going to have January 1st deadlines. So we got 2 weeks and Christmas is in there. That's too much time if it's a school with a lot of college-specific essays to do all that work. So when I said, is it okay to apply to one, I'm defining apply as in terms of hitting the submit button. That's what I'm defining, right?
Right.
That's because that's actually when you apply.
Right.
But I am encouraging people, and I encourage all those students I told you about I can't remember exactly right now if it's 15 or 20 that are applying ED right now that I'm working with, but it's somewhere in the high teens. And so they know, like, okay, let's say their list is 10 schools. Then they know that I like to see 5 to 6 of them, the applications are done, just in case. You don't have to hit submit, but let's get the applications done.
Mm-hmm.
So have you picked others? Is it a balanced list? And have you done the applications for at least 3 or 4 other ones? So those are other questions that I have. And then one more word on the money, because one of the questions Gail said is, am I going to regret it later? Well, this is what I say about college. You make your happiness at college.
Mm.
Every school is going to have professors you love, some you don't love. Students you love, some you don't love. Courses you like, some you don't like. Roommates you like and don't like. Like, they all have that. You got to make your happiness. So if you're looking for heaven on earth, then you're not going to be happy.
Mm.
But if you have a realistic expectation and you've done your research, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be happy at the school that you go to if you've got realistic expectations.
Right.
The one thing I do want to bring up about money, and sometimes this throws people off, it's one thing to be able to afford an early decision school. It's another thing to say, if another school offered you $20 or $30 or $40,000, would you turn that down? Because you are giving up your ability to see other offers. And if you're financially in a strong enough place where you can do that, or if the school is such a strong first choice that you're okay with that, then that's perfectly fine. Like I said, I wouldn't have my kids applying ED, that don't check all those boxes.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen cases where somebody applied ED, they did not withdraw their other applications. They got an offer with crazy merit money from one, and now they really regret it that they applied ED. Because they were like, okay, I could afford this other one, but I don't want to pay this when this school's offering me to pay that. Does that make sense, Anika, or not? I was like,
no, it makes absolute sense. Perfect sense.
Wow. Yeah.
But let me ask you one other thing, and I hate I'm not saying that this child is not qualified for, whatever school they're applying early decision.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to put that out there in terms of the research. Does the research mean that you research and find out where your kid lies within the profile of the accepted student? Like, have you had that honest look about to say, hey, he actually has a chance of getting in?
Now you're not just reading my mind, you're reading my notes. Because I wasn't on my list. I wasn't on my list, and that's one of my next things I
was
had.
a little surprised you had it. I thought you were wrapping it up.
I was just going down my list.
Okay, keep rolling.
Yeah, so that's my other question. I said, is this ED realistic? Okay, or is it what I call a lottery school, or sometimes I call that a long shot or an unlikely? It just depends if I need to jar somebody. Sometimes I have to call them a lottery school if I have to awaken them from their complacency or their detachment from reality. But basically, to me, those are all synonymous. A lottery school, a long shot, or an unlikely. If it's a lottery school, a long shot, or an unlikely, all synonymous, just different terms I use at different times. That's a school that, you're going to have an under 50% chance of being admitted at. And if it falls in that category, then that also, impacts whether or not you should have other applications ready. Now, here's an advantage to not submitting other applications. Some of these apps are $100. If you submit 10 other apps, that's $1,000. If you're not going there anyway, you saved $1,000 when you didn't have to hit the submit button. Now, don't get me wrong. I went on the high end. It's more common to see 50 to 80 than it is to see the 100. But but it is out there.
And that's still a lot.
Yeah, still $800. And some people have more than 10. So there's some cost savings involved in there as well. And the cost savings for no reason. Like, why would you hit submit if you're not going? Like, there's nothing gained by that. So saving the app fees. And so those are my thoughts. Now, I do have to say this, Anika. I would be a complete and total hypocrite with Gail if I didn't give this answer this way. And the reason for that is what Gail described was Karis. So we did our visits, Anika. We started at between 10th and 11th to the big California trip. I mean, we traveled all around. I think I spent well over $5,000 visiting colleges, and that was a long time ago because that was like 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And so we spent a lot of money traveling around because, airfare, hotels, meals, rent-a-car, that adds up really fast.
All right.
Because Karis was doing a national search. So we did all that. She had her list. She had everything down. But she had spent 3 weeks at Davidson during their July Experience program between junior and senior year. She went back to Davidson again for their junior preview day. And then they had like a multicultural fly-in program. She did that. She'd been at campus 3 times, including spending 3 weeks there, and she never, ever wavered. So she had other applications ready to go, but she ended up being Gail. She submitted one application, got in, and so she had other schools on her list. Claremont colleges, were on there. University of Richmond, a bunch of schools were on her list. She did 3 other fly-in programs, but she submitted one app to one school, got in, had the other ones ready to go, and never submitted them.
Wow.
So I'd be a total hypocrite if I said anything other.
All right.
You're surprised by my answer.
I'm very surprised. You know that. And I feel like you told me that about Karis before, but wait, what? Yeah.
I mean, because with ED, you have to withdraw your applications, if you're in. And to be honest, I thought she would get admitted because, one of the things that Davidson loved, they use their July Experience program very, very much evaluatively. If you go there for 3 weeks, it's taught by their professors. And Chris Gruber, the director of admission, I've been told by multiple credible sources that the most important thing in the evaluation is how you do in their 3 weeks there. Because not only do they get to see how you do with their courses and their grades, but also they're watching and observing how you act.
Right.
And then she got rave reviews on that because you know how they send. Jalen did that. He did the same program.
He did. Yeah, he did.
So, they send that report card home, and that report card was very, very effusive. So I thought she'd get in, and she got in. Life is good.
Yeah. Good luck, Gail.
Good luck, Gail. Hope that helped. Doesn't mean it wasn't stressful, though, just because I thought she'd get in. I remember I'm feeling for the parents in that stress. My families are stressing right now, and I'm feeling for them because nobody likes to see their baby get hurt.
Right. Preview time for you.
Yeah, I remember Karis walking down the stairs with the announcement, and I'm like, my heart was pounding. It's not because there's not good options out there, but you just don't want to see your baby get hurt. Okay. All right. Friends, I hope you've heard the first 2 parts of my interview with Emily Griffin. To me, this is one of a real breakthrough interview because I've never read anywhere else or seen anything else where someone tells us how to evaluate a career center as part of the evaluation of a college. And Emily does that here. But in part 3, she's going to share what resources are out there to help people know what their engagement should be with career services. She also talks about the new trends on college campuses with career centers. And then I put Emily on the hot seat. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
I don't know if you've written this or if you know of a resource, but I know what I would love to be able to share with our listeners and just with all the students I work with is almost like a 4-year plan, even if it's just bullet point, right? 3 to 5 things to do freshman year, sophomore. Do you know of anything at all that's out there like that, Emily?
There are different career centers that certainly have produced different maps for their students. Thinking about that, I know that University of Chicago has a really great resource that connects, that kind of maps out, here are some things you can be doing in your first year, here are some things you can be doing in your second year. I don't know if they're readily available publicly on their website, but I've certainly seen some examples of those, and it's a project that we've been talking about at Amherst. I agree with you. I think that, it's tricky for us, and it doesn't excuse us from not creating a resource like this, because I do think that people really need it. But trying to balance, here are some milestones that we really hope that you're engaging in at certain moments along the way, for your benefit, but balancing that without being prescriptive. What we have with some of our students is if they wait too long to engage in activities where they're really figuring out who they are and how that fits with career planning, they get really anxious because they've waited. And then they look around at what their friends are doing, and then they just do kind of the first thing that seems to reduce their anxiety, the first thing that feels like a concrete pathway, and it really might be a terrible fit for them. So really, our investment in students starting earlier with this kind of work, it's not so much because we're anxious that they won't get jobs after graduation. It's that we really want them to get the right job. We really want them to be doing the work that is the best fit for them. To your point, to avoid, we're all going to have midlife crises, right? But
right.
we all have some version of it. But if we can,
some of us have more than one.
Oh, thanks for the heads up. I had my first.
May not be the last.
It's important that I hear this
now. Not trying to cast an omen on you or anything.
No, I like to be prepared and I like to do my research. But, if we can lessen that at all, then I feel like, we're doing something.
Well, if you ever come across any resources, please send them our way. I can put them in our show notes. I can give you all the attribution and credit, and happy to do that.
Thanks, Mark. I'll look for that.
Yeah, thanks. So as we start to wind down, is there anything you haven't said about career centers that it's just on your mind to share that we haven't discussed?
I think what's interesting is that it has really become a trend that colleges are increasing resources for career centers, which I think is overdue. I think it's kind of the new arms race with colleges. It used to be the fancier dorms and amenities and gyms, and I really think this is the new space for competition. But I think it really matters, and I think especially it matters with liberal arts schools. I think that the challenge of a liberal arts education is that it actually expands your abilities and your versatility so much that it can be challenging to figure out then what are the narrow spaces where you're actually going to kind of set a foot and begin and get started. Because, the world is so open to somebody with that kind of an education. And so I think it's even more imperative for liberal arts schools to have a strong career development function, almost to balance that, to just really kind of think about, okay, let the faculty do their job of educating you and creating all this fertile ground. And then let us be, the tactical people. Let us help you think about, the logistics. And I think that those two things, when they go hand in hand, is really the most brilliant combination.
I'm definitely seeing the increase in resources, and I'm welcoming this wholeheartedly. Like
you are.
I remember, when it was really rare for a school to say that we'll take your unpaid internship and give you a grant so that you don't have to worry about working a job to make money, at least for one of your summers. And, and now I'm seeing a lot of schools do it, even schools that aren't that wealthy with large endowments or endowment per students doing $2,500, $3,000, $35,000, even up to $5,000. And so if this is the new arms race, I welcome this one because I think that, it's probably an over from the global financial crisis in 2008, right? And people want to know what's the ROI. And also loans, student loans, and cost of college, all of that whole conversation of is college worth it or how can I justify it? This is like a total deliverable, right? This is the deliverable.
It really is. And I think that some schools have been resistant to that, that the ROI speaks for itself, but it kind of doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't speak for itself. We do need to speak to it. And I think also, there are more and more first generation college students coming into higher education, which is a phenomenal thing. That should be what we're doing. I hope that means that, there will be more traction with social mobility in this country. But because of that, I do think that we need more active career centers and really proactive resources to meet those students where they are. So, the fact that most internships are unpaid, decades ago, that might not have been a problem. But right now, at Amherst, we have nearly 30% of our student body is either first gen and or low income, and that's really challenging. It means that they might miss out on opportunities that, their peers with more resources, it might be really simple for them. And I think that colleges do have to find a way of leveling the playing field with those resources. And I have so much respect for colleges that manage to prioritize that and do that when they don't have the big endowments. With Amherst, we're in a privileged position. We have a lot of support behind us. I know that that's not at every school. So the schools that do that without, the endowments behind them that, a place like Amherst has or a place like Williams has, they're making some very good decisions, and they're really understanding what's needed with the student body now.
Love it. Love it. Well, I told you before we let all our guests go, we put them on the hot seat in what we call our lightning round. I warned you. You ready?
Okay, just don't ask me about my midlife crisis.
No, I'm not going to do that. You can come back on as a guest another time and then recount that with great detail. But I will ask you this. How does Emily relax and enjoy herself when she's not working?
Oh, man, I cook.
Oh.
Yeah, and, it's not just the cooking. It's the grocery shopping. It's the planning. It's the imagining. It's the reading cookbooks and reading recipes. And, it's the meal planning. So it's actually how I manage stress during the week, even if I'm not actively cooking. Thinking and planning about what I will cook when I have time to cook is kind of the way that I shut down the stress in my brain, and I just kind of think about something else. But yeah, there's nothing like having a whole bunch of vegetables to prep and chop and prepare. That's, even if it takes hours, I find it really, really relaxing.
My oldest daughter, she graduated from Davidson College, which you're familiar with them.
Yeah.
In 2018. And she relaxes the same way. She's a little bit cooking and baking.
Oh, yeah.
And now it's like turned into this business because she's like, people are like paying her. And now she's doing like wedding cakes and all this stuff.
Oh, for her.
So yeah. And she's like loving it. So just interesting how like a little hobby can turn into something, which is cool. What about pottery? What about pottery or your art side? Do you do any of that?
No, you know what? I don't. I really, the big thing that I learned in college was the difference between me and people who were really artists. I mean, I was artistic, but, really seeing other people do it with a totally different level of kind of need and commitment. But I do a lot of interior design. I do a lot of work on my house, and that's kind of my visual space for sure.
I see your creative side coming out here.
Yeah.
The planning with the meal, the shopping, and then the interior decorating.
It's there. Yep. It's there. But it's interwoven. It's also very practical.
If you had to switch careers and you couldn't work in career services or placement, what would you do?
I'd be a real estate agent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What's the fascination there?
I mean, I think that I've always been really interested in houses. Again, I think it's a visual thing, but I got really obsessed with it when I bought my first house. Just the entire kind of soup to nuts process of all of the people involved that through buying my house, I was contributing to this incredible local economy. I had to pay a home inspector. I had to pay a radon inspector. I had to pay a lawyer. I had to pay my real estate agent. There was I had to get a new boiler, and, it was just so many people got paid from me making this one purchase. It wasn't just, the sellers of the house. And I found that so fascinating. And the fact that my real estate agent almost was like a mentor helping me understand the process and work through it. I felt like I could really, really enjoy and feel rewarded, helping other people go through the same thing, and also, plugging into that kind of local economy in a way that is, it's hard to do these days, with Amazon and globalization, but it was profoundly local. So I think I'd probably dive into that.
You're starting to sound like both my daughters wrapped up into one package, because my youngest daughter is junior at the University of Georgia. She wants to actually work in higher ed. Actually, she wants to get her master's in student affairs. But on the side, she wants to be a realtor. She's like all into those I can't even say it right. HGTV network or whatever, watching all those.
Oh man.
She's like, yeah, that's like what the ladies in my house, everybody but me, they would sit around and watch that show.
Yeah.
I just work.
Yeah. No. Oh, this is so funny. I have so much in common with your kids. It's great.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, I come on here every week and I share a recommended resource with you. But this time it's different. I'm going to make a request. I'm going to ask that you buy this book if you have a daughter or if you're a college counselor and you work with girls and young ladies. I recommended this book to a student I'm working with this week, and the parents read it immediately, and it was a total game changer for them. The recommended resource for episode 99 is the book, Enough as She Is. The subtitle of this book is How to Help Girls Move Beyond Impossible Standards of Success to Live Healthy, Happy, and Fulfilled Lives. And the book is by Rachel Simmons. Simmons specializes in helping students transition to college. She travels across the country working with high school students. She has taken scientific surveys that reveal that the highest levels of girls' unhappiness is being recorded right now. And Simmons' book was released in 2019. And what her book does is it addresses how girls are uniquely struggling with mental health in a way that guys just don't struggle with anywhere near at the same levels. The book debunks the myths of the amazing girl, the college version of the superwoman. The book reveals new research on depression, anxiety, inability to socially adjust, and body shame, and how they're more prevalent in upperly mobile families. Simmons talks about role overload, which is too many roles for a single individual to fulfill. And she also talks about role conflict, which is when the roles girls have to fulfill are at odds with each other, contributing to greater stress and anxiety. She says we have developed a culture that puts achievement over attachment. Simmons says we are putting the same retrograde expectations on girls we put on men when it comes to standards of education and career success. But females also have to bear the burden of being expected to fulfill the traditional standards of beauty and motherhood. Simmons bemoans the superficial criteria by which we evaluate girls. Good grades and college enrollment is not a marker of a life well lived, Simmons says. She is very critical of the role social media is playing in reinforcing unattainable standards of beauty, popularity, and perception. She says girls have to be superhuman, ambitious, smart, driven, physically fit, kind, pretty, sexy, socially active, athletic, and liked by everyone. It is an impossible standard. And here are two of my favorite quotes from the book. Girl competence does not equal girl confidence. And I like this quote even more. Girls grew up hearing they can be anything, but what they really heard is that they have to be everything. Let me repeat that in case you didn't catch that. Girls grow up hearing they could be anything, but what they really heard is that they have to be everything. We will now return to the final segment of my interview with Emily Griffin. So listen, we get a lot of great vacation ideas from our guests. So what's your favorite place to go on vacation?
The only place I go on vacation, I think, has to be my favorite place. I go to Maine, which is pretty common up here.
You're a New Englander.
You know what? I really am a New Englander. I was raised in suburban New York, but both my parents are from Boston. And so more broadly, all my family and close family friends are from New England. And so even in New York, and I think this, part of why I moved to Western Mass, I was coming up here all the time anyway to visit family. But Maine is really special. It's, I don't like the heat. So in the summer, it's nice to go as north as I can within reason. The beaches are colder. It's just colder. And so I really like that. And I like that I've been going my whole life and probably always will.
Love it. Love it. So we do get some students that listen, and they tend to be these, very highly motivated types because you could be on Pandora or doing it in Netflix, right? Whatever. But
they're doing this.
Yes, we do get some. Yeah. And give them a pearl of wisdom or two. What advice do you have for our students out there?
If you're motivated enough to be listening to this podcast, then you are going to be fine. that is really the pearl of wisdom that, I wish I could give to all of those students that fit that profile. It's, to really think about what makes you happy day to day. Give yourself a break when you can, really prioritize the things you value and care about, prioritize your friends, prioritize your family, and, just participate and keep exploring your interests, and you're going to land. You're going to be completely fine. I'm not worried about you at all.
I have to tell you, I laughed so hard. We have a survey that our podcast listeners do, and it's on our website and put it on the show notes. And we really get a lot of great ideas to improve our podcast. And one parent wrote in with some question on there, like, what's your favorite thing about the podcast? And they said, I can play it in the car when my kid is listening because they don't listen to me anymore. So I can play selective episodes of what I want them to hear. I didn't get it in that way. I just had to laugh.
Fantastic.
Had to laugh. So we do have parents, which is by far our largest audience, are parents of high school students.
Sure.
What's your advice to them?
It's similar to the advice I would give their kids that, if your child is attending a college and they're diligent and they stay in college, and again, if they pursue their real interests, they're going to be okay. And, the thing that, again, I wish I could tell more parents, so this is an awesome opportunity for me, so thank you. Your child is going to be the best and most successful at the thing that they enjoy the most. That, if they really do the thing that they actually derive real enjoyment and reward from, on a personal level, on socially, emotionally, values wise, then they're going to stand out. They're going to clearly emerge in their fields, as being talented, as being remarkable, being people that are picked for promotion and are successful. And if they do something that feels just like the practical path to the most success, they won't have that spark. Other people will, but they won't. And I don't think that they'll go as far. So it's actually the practical thing to encourage them to stay true to what they're really passionate about.
I love how you positively put that in with a nice bow on it, because I could interpret that as like, parents, stop trying to pick your career for your kids.
I am a diplomatic communicator.
You are. Now, one thing you said earlier, and I was going to accentuate it because I loved it at the time, but I'll bring it up now. You were talking about how you graduated, you weren't sure what to do, and then you started reading all of these books. And I think an important lesson is for all of our kids is like education doesn't end once you graduate, right? We all need to be lifetime learners. And
absolutely.
So that is a nice segue into what really is my last question for you in this segment, which is, what's the best book or few books that you've read that were just impactful in your life? People write in and say, that guest mentioned that book and I got it. It was amazing. We get that kind of feedback. So, yeah. What should our readers buy, or what worked for you? We can just leave it with that. What worked for you?
Yeah. Well, living in New England, I've been reading a lot of books about Native American history in my region. That's been really important to me. That's kind of been something that, especially as I raise a child here, wanting to make sure that I'm offering up that information and that history. So there are a lot of books that I've been reading about that. I think that, I read Educated by Tara Westover this past summer. I know
I haven't read that. I've wanted to. Is it really good?
I haven't read that yet.
I did. I listened to it on this thing called Blinkist. Do you know Blinkist? It's like 10-minute. It's like 10-minute audiobooks.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. So you can just blow, like if you have a trip, you can just blow through all these books that you've heard about. You don't have time to read.
Oh.
And so I did that. I drove from like Virginia to Georgia, like 500 some miles. And I just blew through all these Blinkist books. So that's the only way but what can you tell us about that book?
Well, first of all, it reads like a suspense novel, which I wasn't prepared for. I mean, it's just every single chapter feels like a cliffhanger where, for those who don't know, it's a story about a young woman who was raised in Utah with some not just fundamentalist parents, but really outliers who homeschooled their children, had their children working in their family junkyard from a very young age, very unsafe conditions, pretty frightening environment for children, and really no opportunity for education, especially for women. And so she was, I don't know if she was the only daughter, I can't remember now, but certainly there was no prioritization of her education or growth, within her family. So really just, it feels like conditions set in stone, right? Like, how is she going to get out of this one? How is she going, at the end of the book, she must have emerged from this culture and done something different because she wrote this book, and you can read in the author profile that she has a PhD from Cambridge. So where she lands.
Right.
But as you're reading it, you're like, how is she going to get out? Like, how is she going to get out of the junkyard? And, and terrible accidents with her and her brothers and her family, just terrible, terrible. And I loved it because it was really suspenseful and really interesting, and a culture I didn't know anything about. But it was just also just so stunning how, she was so determined. And even though she was terrified and she was completely insecure and totally unprepared for college, and, basically felt the entire time, she went through college and grad school, and, just total imposter syndrome, shouldn't be there, had this happen, she still did it. She still kept trying to, create conditions for herself to thrive, and it was, I just found it entirely inspiring.
Thank you for sharing that. So last two things.
Yeah.
Could you share the Amherst Career Center website or portion of the web, the URL, for if people want to poke around? And then if one of our parents had a question for you, would it be okay if they emailed you?
Oh, yeah. Always open to emails, of course. And our URL is amherst.edu, and Amherst is AMHERST. The H is silent. That's a little fun fact on everybody knows. So amherst.edu/campus